Welcome back to another explainer. If you've ever felt completely scattered, like you have 50 tabs open right now, your phone is constantly blowing up, and your focus feels just totally shattered, believe me, you are not alone. Today, we're diving into what I like to call the spatial mindset. We're going to figure out how to master systems thinking in a world that feels incredibly fragmented, and we'll learn how to shift away from those panicked, isolated reactions toward a much calmer, macro perspective. Let's kick things off with a pretty critical question. Why is it that our solutions so often just create brand new problems? Think about it. It's 2 p.m., your energy tanks, so your immediate reaction is to chug a coffee. Or a massive project stalls, so you just brute force your way through the evening. We are constantly treating the immediate symptom right in front of us, but doing that almost always triggers a secondary crisis. Like, you get terrible sleep that night, which guarantees an even worse crash the next day. So why exactly does this keep happening?
Well, here's our map for today's explainer to help us figure that out. We're going to quickly cover the linear illusion, move into spatial dependencies and loops, break down a systems auditing blueprint, look at the causal loop journal, and then wrap things up with a conclusion.
All right, let's jump right into section 1, the linear illusion. You see, this linear illusion is basically our default setting when we face any complex problem. We tend to lean into linear, reactive thinking, assuming one isolated cause points straight to one simple effect. But let's be real, human life and cognitive performance absolutely do not work like that. They operate as a rich, deeply interconnected web. It's much more like a biological ecosystem. This is exactly why getting things out of your head and sketching out your problems, really drawing pictures and thinking spatially, is such a game changer. You stop staring at isolated dots and start seeing the entire tapestry of how things actually connect. It's just like physical geography, no landmark, and honestly no problem, exists in total isolation. Think about how weather patterns dictate soil chemistry, which then entirely determines what crops can even grow in a region. Your daily workflow is the exact same way. If you shift just one variable, the entire equilibrium has to recalibrate. You literally can't change one thing without the whole web vibrating. One bad morning habit doesn't just ruin your morning. It sends this massive ripple effect that totally torpedoes your afternoon deep work. Which brings us to section 2, spatial dependencies and loops. Let's see how this whole ecosystem concept actually plays out in our daily lives. To really grasp this, we can borrow a super fascinating rule from geography, known as Tobler's first law. It essentially states that everything is related to everything else, but near things are more related than distant things. This is the textbook definition of spatial dependency. And crazy enough, it perfectly describes human cognition. A chaotic, messy desk right in your line of sight is going to completely wreck your immediate focus way more than a messy closet down the hall. Your immediate physical environment is intrinsically tied to your mental output. Now, in systems theory, this spatial dependency shows up as feedback loops. Take a look at a reinforcing loop, for instance. You hit a wall of intense burnout, which ruins your sleep, which in turn skyrockets your exhaustion, just constantly compounding that negative behavior until you totally crash. On the flip side, we have balancing loops. These act to stabilize the system and keep things in check, kind of like going for a quick walk when you're stressed so your cortisol levels drop back down to a baseline normal. Figuring out which loop you're actually stuck in, that is half the battle right there. So the big takeaway here is this: stop fighting the symptoms and start mastering the dynamics. When you finally shift to spatial analysis, you stop agonizing over what caused one isolated event. Instead, you step back. You look at the underlying structural web that actually allowed that event to happen in the first place. Basically, you stop treating the headache and you finally start fixing your posture. All right, moving on to section 3, the Systems Auditing Blueprint. This right here is your exact 3-step blueprint for auditing literally any complex challenge you're facing at work or in life. We've got step 1, topographic mapping, step 2, loop identification, and step 3, leverage node location. So for step 1, topographic mapping, I want you to view your problem from 30,000 feet and map out the entire terrain. Don't just obsess over the immediate issue. Seriously, write down every single influencing variable you can possibly think of. Your sleep, your environment, the incentives, what you're consuming daily, your energy levels. There is this incredible sense of relief that washes over you when you get all that abstract noise out of your head and onto a physical map, drawing out the picture where you can actually see it. Then in step 2, loop identification, you're going to physically trace the arrows between those variables you just mapped out. The real secret sauce here is finding the direction of the flow. Ask yourself, Is your physical disorganization driving your mental stress? Or is a massive amount of cognitive overload actually creating that physical mess? Figuring out which way the arrow points tells you exactly which loops are secretly compounding against you. And that leads us right into step 3, locating your leverage point. A leverage point is just a single structural node in a system where a tiny strategic shift produces massive systemic change. Think of it like the trim tab on a giant ocean liner. It's just this tiny little flap of metal on the edge of the rudder, but turning it creates a pressure pocket that effortlessly steers the entire massive ship. So instead of constantly pushing harder against your whole life, you just find this one friction point, tweak it, and let momentum do the heavy lifting. Let's put this into practice in section 4, the causal loop journal. Whenever you run into a persistent hurdle, whether it's with studying, your finances, or your workflow, do not just write down a depressing text-based list of complaints. Seriously, grab a notebook and literally sketch this out. Draw pictures, map it out, transform those abstract frustrations into a tangible causal loop diagram. Label your inputs, connect the dependencies, and explicitly mark those positive or negative feedback loops. Forcing your brain to see these connections visually as an actual picture totally changes how you tackle the problem. Let's look at a quick example. Say you're battling that deeply frustrating feeling of low daily output. You probably feel terrible about it, but when you map this out as a visual web, you might see that it connects directly to constant context switching and unclear morning priorities. Once you literally see this drawn out, connecting those real dependencies, that heavy guilt just vanishes. You suddenly realize it's not a lack of personal willpower at all. It's honestly just a badly designed system. And that's why the real magic of this exercise is entirely psychological. It completely strips away all that emotional frustration. You stop being a helpless victim to this mysterious storm cloud of problems, and you step up as an objective spatial architect. You're moving from a state of frantic, reactive panic straight into calm, deliberate design. Which brings us home to section 5, our conclusion. I am absolutely obsessed with this takeaway. You don't have a personal failure, you simply have a structural flaw in your system that needs redesigning. How freeing is that? It completely reframes our daily struggles. They aren't personal shortcomings or character flaws anymore. They are just actionable, structural design issues that you can totally fix with a pen and a piece of paper. So remember, the world is absolutely not just a random collection of isolated events. It's a fascinating, complex tapestry of interconnected systems. Mastering it really comes down to 3 basic things: mapping the terrain, locating your leverage points, and navigating forward with total clarity. So I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought to chew on. What single structural flaw in your daily routine is secretly a massive leverage point just waiting to be redesigned? Think about that for a bit, grab a notebook, and start drawing out your own terrain today. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.